Welcome to episode 3 of the Easton podcast. I'm George Tekmitchov, and today we've got a special guest. It is the Secretary General of World Archery, Mr. Tom Dielen. Tom, thank you for joining us via telephone from Lausanne, I believe, right?
That's correct, George, and a pleasure for me to be in this podcast.
Well, at this time, we are back from Copenhagen with, I believe, to be a very successful event having taken place. The World Archery Championships in the history books, and it was a big one for the history books, wasn't it?
Absolutely. It has been breaking records on all levels, in participation, both in countries and in athletes, especially in the recurve categories. It broke all records, 1 and 200 in the recurve men competing for 3 medals, for instance.
Every event of this size has its challenges and its successes. Let's talk about the challenges. The weather, certainly one of the biggest ones, right?
Yeah, the weather. The weather. Okay, it's clear that being in the north of Europe is opening the door for some challenges with the weather. If you look at the TV images over the weekend, you would not expect it that there was hail and quite challenging weather for the athletes, because on the weekend the weather was perfect, and you would need rather sun cream rather than a raincoat. But during the week we've had some challenging weather conditions.
Yeah, pouring rain. There was hail at one point. We had wind speeds of up to 30 miles an hour, and it was certainly tough on the archers. But interestingly, I think you'll agree that the best archers did rise to the surface.
Well, I think experience helps for certain archers for sure. And if you look at who won, in the end, no big surprises. The world record holder in the men compound won the world title. Kim Woo-jing in the men, he was the world champion in 2011, claimed his second title. Kibo Bae from Korea, Olympic champion, but never made it to world champion. Well, she got a world champion title. So it's clear that there's, in the end, I would say, a logical outcome of most of the medals. Now, of course, some people fell out early on and didn't make it to the finals. But in general, we can say it was a good competition. 17 countries medals, 4 continents. The only continent that didn't medal was Oceania, but I'm pretty sure that Australia was quite happy with the 3 team places they got for the Olympics. So a very, very universal competition with a lot of countries winning medals.
And this is a great, important point, the universality of our sport. It's one of the reasons why we're a core Olympic sport now.
Absolutely. Universality is key for our sport. And let's face it, we're one of the most, if not the most competitive sport for medals now.
Looking at the recurve women, we had Kibo Bae, we had Lin Xie-chia, and we had Choi Mi-sun. So that's an Asia sweep for the recurve women. But there were a lot of other competitive shooters in that category, and I think we're seeing progress. But what is, I think, very significant is...
Yeah, absolutely.
What I think is very significant, though, Tom, is looking at the compound women. We now have a Korean...
Yeah, compound women is... Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
compound women really is breaking open, and I think it is a necessary thing to happen. I think I had a lot of discussions earlier this year with manufacturers and people in the industry about what the chances are for compound to get in the Olympics and so on. And the point I've made every time is that there needs to be a huge change in compound women in terms of universality and competitiveness, and I think what we have seen in Copenhagen is the first step for sure.
Sure. I mean, we've got our first Korean world champion in the compound women's category. We have, shall we say, the usual suspects, an American, Crystal Galvin, doing a great job taking second place at that event. And then, of course, from South America, the great Sarah Lopez of Colombia. So that's universality at its best, I would imagine. In the past, we've had Russian archers, German archers.
Yeah, and okay, we had the Russian compound ladies did quite well. A little bit disappointing were, I would say, Italy, France, Britain, you can say as well, in terms of compound women. But it's clear that it's so tight in all in terms of you make 1-9, you drop 10 places in the rankings. It's very, very competitive these days.
Yeah. Recurve men, no big surprises, I would say, except, Tom, where are the French? What is going on?
Yeah, that was the big, I would say, surprise. Having said that, based on the season so far, they didn't do well in Shanghai. They didn't do well in Baku at European Games. So it was coming. I think they need to have serious, I would say, analysis made of why it's not working. Because if I look at results of competitions in France, which I regularly follow, and I see the results are there. It's just they don't seem to be able to do it on the day it needs to happen.
So it's a performance issue under pressure, perhaps.
Yeah, and also, well, they had some, of course, since London they lost Kyle Prévost. They had some other archers that are no longer making the team, and I think it's important that they make a full analysis of what is happening.
Okay, let's look at this from the perspective of the Olympic selection portion of the event. And by the way, I'm here with Tom Dielen, Secretary General of World Archery. I'm George Tekmitchov. You're listening to episode 3 of the Easton podcast. Tom, this event was very important from the standpoint of providing countries the opportunity to win both team and individual slots for the Olympic Games. By example, if you finished in the top 8 in the team round, you had a full team qualified, that is 3 individuals, for the Rio Olympics next year. Similarly, if you had an individual perhaps not finish in the top 8 in the teams, but still finish in the top 8 individually, they would win a single slot for their countries. With that said, what was your biggest surprise from this event?
Well, I would say now we have also had time to really look at the details. The biggest surprise is, okay, first of all, we have less countries that got places than in Torino. We have 3 less countries in total getting places. Then the other thing is that the first impression was that Europe lost its places to Asia. Now, if you look at the facts, it's actually not the case. Asia got exactly the same number of places they got in Torino, 26 places. Europe definitely has gone down, but the winner in the whole story is the Americas, where there is 9 more places allocated to the Americas than in Torino.
And we're not counting Brazil there, right?
Well, we're counting Brazil, of course, in that as well, which is, of course, a host player. But still, the winner, independent of Brazil, is the Americans.
That counts people like Colombia, for example.
Colombia, Venezuela, are 2 examples. And then
Mexico?
Mexico, Canada got a place in the end as well. So
United States got a total of 4 places, 3 for the...
Event for the Americans. Exactly, which is the same situation as they had in Torino, 3 men and 1 woman. And then, of course, they got the team place in 2012 in the final qualifying tour.
But a big disappointment for France and a big disappointment for Great Britain, I would imagine.
Yeah, talk about Olympic legacy. The next Olympic Games, after you hosted the Olympic Games and you don't make any place at the main qualifier, they're going to be under a big challenge to get any place now for Rio. Maybe the home advantage of the European continental qualifier will help.
That's in Nottingham, England, right?
Exactly, yeah. But there as well, they have to make some serious analysis of what the situation is. They have great youngsters coming up, but I'm afraid it will be a little bit too late for Rio. I think they should now focus really on Tokyo and then hopefully get lucky and get some places for Rio.
Well, to be sure, part of the problem is that they have big competition for that continental qualifying tournament, because you've got France, for example, in the hunt for some Olympic slots, and that's going to be a problem. You're going to have some other powerful countries, Germany, Italy come to mind, looking for slots at that event in Nottingham.
In the continental qualifier, Germany and Italy are out
because they've got
advantage. They got they got places individually and team in the men for Italy.
So they don't play.
Germany is out, but you still have a lot of countries in the hunt for places. In the men, Russia is one to name. Turkey has 0 as well. That's another big archery country that is looking for places. You have the Moldova kid that shot really well in the qualification and didn't make it in the end for the place. So you have a lot of still very strong nations that are looking for spots. So the place will be very, very expensive.
Hard to get. All right. And then finally, there's one more event. That's the final qualifying tournament, which will be at the World Cup event in Antalya, Turkey next spring. Now, that's out of sequence as events go, right? There's some changes to the World Cup schedule?
Yeah, there will be, next year, Olympic year, we only have 3 World Cup stages, but the final one will be in Antalya, which will have 1 extra day to accommodate the final team qualifier and also the final individual qualifying tournament. And there will be 3 team spots per gender on the spot. This was introduced also for the London qualification, and it's mainly to give a second chance to teams that didn't make it during the World Championships. And there, if you look at, for instance, the next host of the Olympic Games, Japan, is going to look for qualifying the men's team. I think it's one. The Taipei team is another one in the women's. And then, coming back to the Germany, France, US, we already mentioned for the women, India for the men. There is a lot of very, very strong nations that are going to compete for those 3 places. Yeah,
it will not be easy by any means. The pressure will be very high. And I think it's a little tough on the teams, Tom. You mentioned the Japanese men, just as an example. The Japanese Federation is actually going to send their men's team here to Salt Lake City in January for a camp and a round-robin event, which will generate for them their final candidates to send to Antalya. That's a strategy that they are taking that's different than what they originally planned. And lots of countries are going to be doing whatever it takes to get those final slots, but that takes some focus away from actual Olympic preparation, doesn't it?
It does. Having said that, on the other hand, we have seen in the past that the ones that do well at the final qualifiers, meaning European Championships, Rick van der Ven is a good example.
Yeah, good one.
He got the spot from the Netherlands just at the last moment. They tend to do also quite well in the Olympics. But it's clear that they know what they're going to do this winter, that's for sure.
Looking ahead to the next World Championships, the event comes to the Americas, specifically Mexico City. Tell us a little bit about the venue and what you expect 2 years from now.
Well, Mexico is going to host for the first time a senior World Championship. They hosted the Youth World Championship in the past. Mexico, really archery is one of their key sports. Of course, that got a lot of support after they won 2 medals in London. And they see now archery really as one of their key sports that they want to follow. The beat was really coming from the athletes. Juan René Serrano, to give a name, he was really pushing for the beat because he wanted to really bring a championship to his country, and we were quite impressed with what they were doing with the Mexican Challenge, where in a few months they were able to put together a really good event similar to what we do with the World Cup Finals. So we really look forward. Socalau is where we will have the World Cup Final this year, which, if it's successful there, we will also do the World Championships Final there, which is middle of town. They're expecting 5,000 spectators per session, so it could be really, really big.
And, of course, the finals for the World Cup this year will be there, and that will be a great shakedown for the preparation for the next World Championships taking place in 2017.
Yeah, I think it will give a good first impression of what it can be in 2 years' time. And at the same time, I think also it will be the first World Championship of a new generation, because I had the feeling really in Copenhagen as well that many of the faces that we've been seeing around the country teams are now going to start thinking of stopping to compete internationally since they're being more and more pressured by young people to get in the team. And I think 2019 will be very interesting because you'll see a lot of new faces coming up.
Well, I expect that we'll continue to follow up on the preparations for the Olympic Games with yourself and with Chris Wells and with the team from Rio in the months ahead as we continue these podcasts. Tom, thank you for joining us today. It's been a pleasure having you here. It is World Archery Secretary General, Mr. Tom Dielen, talking to us.
Thank you, George, and I hope we'll listen to many more podcasts on your site.
And so we close another podcast with the wrap-up of the Copenhagen 2015 World Archery Championships. The recurve women, third place Choi Moo-sun of Korea, second place Lin Xie-chia of Chinese Taipei, Ki Bo-bei, the great champion of the Olympic Games of 2012, winning her first World Championships. For the recurve men, it was my good friend Takahiro Furukawa of Japan, shooting the Easton contours, Rick van der Ven, our friend from the Netherlands, and the two-time now world champion from Korea, Kim Woo-jin, who I got to shoot a few arrows with the other day, and he's just a great, great competitor. Sarah Lopez taking third for the compound women, Crystal Galvin of the United States of America taking second place, a silver medal, and the first world champion for women's compound from Korea, but surely not the last. It is Kim Yoon-hee taking the championship. And finally, for the compound men, Adam Ravenscroft of GBR taking third, Rajat Chauhan of India taking second, and the home field advantage went to Stephen Hansen of Denmark, the Prince of Copenhagen, shooting brilliantly after some high-pressure rounds earlier in the week. It was windy, it was rainy, it was cold, and then at the end, it was beautiful weather for the World Championships in Copenhagen, where we look forward to hopefully someday going back for another archery event. That closes out the Easton podcast with our special guest, Mr. Tom Dielen, Secretary General of World Archery. For Easton, I'm George Tekmitchov, and we'll see you next time here on the Easton Podcast.